Hi everybody, my name is Eric Gregory. I'm with Brett Young Seeds and I'm the Director of Marketing and I'm based out of Winnipeg. Today with me we have Justine Cornelson of the Canola Council of Canada. Justine is an agronomy specialist with the Canola Council who also though specializes in blackleg disease in canola and is actually also chair of the Blackleg steering committee for the Western Canadian based committee. So today we couldn't think of a better person to invite along to discuss blackleg in canola. Welcome, Justine.
Awesome, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about blackleg yet again.
Absolutely, and we're happy to have you here. So I've got a couple questions for you. Over the years, as you know, blackleg has been a concern in Western Canada. The concern has ebbed and flowed, both as an agronomic issue and also as a trade issue, a trade irritant. Can you give us an update on the status of blackleg in Western Canadian canola crops over the past number of years and even what's going on here in the 2020 growing season? How widespread is the blackleg issue in canola?
Yeah, so over about, I guess, the last 10 years now, we've seen blackleg start to rise up. We're currently sitting around, when we do our provincial surveys, around about 70 to 75% of fields actually showing the pathogen. So it is very widespread across the prairies, but at low levels. So when we go into a field and actually find the pathogen, we're only finding about 10 to 15% incidence. So that means that the number of plants we survey, only 10% of them are actually showing the blackleg pathogen within them. So that is kind of our one nice thing. It is nice and low. That being said, when we look at trade, our trade partners want us to be under that 5%. So we are still above that, and we would like to get back underneath that 5% incidence. When we start to look at the severity, so how badly infected plants are, we typically rate around a one rating out of a 1 to 5 or 0 to 5 scale, which is how we rate blackleg. So the severity of the pathogen is low. So we know it's there, we know it's present, but at really low levels. When we start to look at yield loss, new yield loss models are showing that blackleg typically starts to cause yield loss at a rating of 2. So that is kind of a nice thing. We know it's an issue. We are seeing a bit of yield loss, but overall it's just it's quiet there in the background. But this last about 10 years, that level has risen up, and that's what we want to do, is drop it back to a lower incidence. So.
Well, interesting. So we're going to come back to that severity rating, I think, just in a minute here. But before we get there, so a few years ago, the Canola Council introduced a major blackleg gene identification system, which describes major blackleg gene resistance genes that may be available in canola varieties that growers can purchase and grow. Can you give us some of the background on this new system and how it differs from the blackleg rating system that was already present in the marketplace?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm getting my years confused here, but I think it was around 2017. This has been something we've been working with the industry for quite a few years, actually, and trying to push it forward, is a major gene labeling system for blackleg. So the Canadian Blackleg Steering Group had put together a bunch of different models, and at registration meetings proposed these models and got the industry to vote on them. So overall, the industry agreed upon this new labeling system. And this is something that we have adopted and kind of changed off of what they use in Australia. Australia has used a major gene labeling system for almost 20 years now. And from that, they're able to predict the severity of the pathogen. They know which hybrids are going to stand up based on their major genes. And then they know how to then rotate them. So our previous labeling system in Canada was just on a percentage of Westar, so susceptible variety. So you get your resistant variety, your moderately resistant, down to a susceptible. And that's all a producer was able to make a decision on if they were having an issue with blackleg, is to grow a resistant variety. Here in Canada, because we had such severe issues back in the 80s and 90s, everything that comes to market is either resistant or moderately resistant to this disease. So it wasn't helping a producer make that decision. Okay, I'm seeing a really bad blackleg issue. What hybrid should I pick next if I'm already growing a resistant variety? So what this major gene labeling system does, it adds more information for a producer to make more of an educated guess on what variety they should be growing. There's more information there to base that decision on, right? We're all dealing with really top hybrids here, but we wanted some more information there to make a decision on hybrids. So the way the labeling system works now is you still have that R rating or that MR rating that you see on your seed bag, but you have the possibility, because it is optional for life science companies to add that major gene label, but then it goes into the labeling scheme. So you could add that on to that resistant rating. So there's different groups, they work in an alphabetical order. So you'll be dealing with groups A's, C's, there's a few G's on the market as well, a few E1s, different letters like that, and they all correspond to a major resistance gene within the hybrids.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, the question is, how should growers or agronomists go about using this new Blackleg gene identification system, and how do they select the varieties that would be most appropriate to their given situations?
Yeah. This is obviously not an easy question to answer. There's a lot of information involved with making that hybrid decision and assessing your blackleg problem. If a producer is seeing their blackleg within a particular field increase over time, that's a really good indicator that the genetics they're using is not matching up to that predominant blackleg race within the field. So there's a few different components there. You need to know what's going on within your hybrid, but also what the pathogen itself looks like. So within the actual field, you can take samples and submit them away to diagnostics labs, and they're able to report back that predominant blackleg race. And within that, you want to then match a hybrid to match that predominant race. So within the hybrids, right, you're going to look for a major gene that corresponds to that predominant race within the field. So it's, like I said, not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of information there. But yeah, if a producer is seeing that increase over time, that's a really good indicator that that major gene within that particular variety is not matching up to that predominant race. And you need a match for that major gene to be effective. The way major genes work within canola varieties is it's kind of like a light switch, an on and off. If it matches the predominant race within the field, it starts that defense response and it stops the pathogen from progressing into the plant. It stops it right at the site of infection.
Okay, so this is something that producers will have to just get used to doing, working with their retail agronomists or doing it themselves in terms of defining sort of the process for their farm.
Yes, yeah. It's like I said, a very complex decision-making process that goes into it. There's a lot of information, and where we see producers using this is when they've had a really bad wreck with blackleg, right? When they can go into the field, they can see that the area that's potentially lodging, or they're seeing yield loss. That's an indicator that there's definitely something going on, and some genetics need to be changed up within the field to make sure they're working effectively. What a nice thing about the system is, and what they've seen in Australia, they've been able to deploy certain genetics, and eventually they end up not matching, and within about a 8 to 10 year period, they're able to reintroduce those genetics. So from a life science company perspective, you're preserving those tools. You're helping increase their longevity so you can actually use them, so you don't have to come up with something new every year.
Okay, so when there's a blackleg wreck, as you say, it's pretty obvious they have an issue.
Yeah.
Often, though, I think blackleg can be an issue, can be robbing yield from growers' fields. How do growers go about determining if they actually have an issue with blackleg? What's the best tools to do that?
I always call blackleg the silent yield robber, because we know it's there, we know it's present, potentially at low levels, sometimes at higher levels, but it's not as obvious. When you go into a canola field and you see sclerotinia, right, you can see the white mold, you can see the patch, the mold growing up them. Something like clubroot, right, you can see the big galls on the plants. Blackleg will be there, but it's not super obvious, right? You have to go into the field, pull up plants and snip them through that root tissue, and that's how you determine the actual severity of the disease. Like I said, not a lot of infection will cause yield loss. So it's something that we just need to know how to scout for properly and how to rate. And some producers will be quite shocked with how much yield they're actually losing from those low levels of the disease.
So Justine, we've been through the plots and we found some incidents of blackleg at varying degrees of severity. Do you want to walk us through to show us how to score blackleg severity and the process that you would use.
Yeah, for sure. So typically when you're rating for blackleg, you're going to go in and you're going to pull up plants that well represent the field. So I go in and I'll pull up anywhere from about 50 to 100 plants to properly rate it. When I rate, I pull up the plants and I assess the entire plant. If you're looking for blackleg, you're typically going to find it lower down in the plant. You're going to have the potential to find stem lesions, and this could be caused from a hail event, and then the pathogen will move in and colonize. But ideally, to properly assess and to assess the severity of it, we cut through the root material. People say at the base of the stem. Unfortunately, a lot of people cut up too high, so we actually want to cut through the root. So I say about a half or quarter of an inch to about a half an inch below, and that's where you're going to cut to make your assessment. So this particular plant's obviously clean, there's no internal blackening, but that's what we're going to look for, is then the internal blackening. So I've got a variety of plants here to show that. So right now, this would be a rating of 1, so it's under 25% of infection across that cross section. The rating scale works from a 0 to 5 rating, so 0 being this clean, healthy plant, no infection, to a 5 that's complete internal blackening. So I've got a few. We're going to move into about a 2 here, so this is getting over that 25%, so 25 to 50%. A 3 moves into that 50 to 75 range. A 4 will become kind of a complete internal blackening. And then a 5 is typically a dead plant. So same, infection across it. It might be showing this cankering. This plant's pretty severe. You can see that it's been pinched off. And that's what blackleg does. That's where the yield loss is being caused from. While it moves down to the base of the plant, it causes that constriction, which cuts the plant off of any nutrients and moisture uptake. So here's just some examples of this actual cankering that you're going to be looking for. There's a lot of, I guess, confusion when you compare it to root rots. But a blackleg canker is going to be this kind of hard, woody lesion within the root material. And you can see why this becomes an issue, right? And how it ends up pinching or breaking off that plant below the soil surface. So just a few different features to be looking for. Some of these plants were also showing the stem lesions. So we've got this gray discoloration and then the pycnidia forming. So when you're looking for blackleg, you are going to be looking for the black little specks, kind of pepper-like. And that's an indicator that it's actually blackleg and not something like gray stem or verticillium.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's now head back to finish off the rest of the discussion.
Awesome.
Beyond variety selection, what other management practices should growers be implementing to reduce blackleg related yield losses on their farm?
Yeah. So thankfully with blackleg, we've got a lot of options to help manage it, which is the nice thing, right? The major gene labeling and the blackleg race ID test, those are just some of the tools that we have in place. Number one is just scouting and knowing what you're dealing with, right? You've got to know that you've got a blackleg issue before you can apply any of the other tools. So knowing what the pathogen looks like, blackleg shows itself in many different faces throughout the season. You can find it early season on the cotyledons. You can see it throughout the summer growing on the stem or even in the cross section. And then into the fall. So knowing how to identify it properly is then like your really key piece. From there, and like every canola or every disease, plant disease, crop rotation is so extremely important. This is a stubble-borne disease, so it needs that old canola residue, that old stubble to survive on. Once that disintegrates or breaks down in the field, it no longer has that home for it, so it dies off as well. Our crop rotation recommendation is a 3-year break, or 2-year break, or growing canola every 3 years. That gives it enough time to break down naturally within the field so you're no longer dealing with it. So that's actually a nice thing when we kind of compare it to clubroot, which is a soil-borne disease that's in the soil, that transfers in the soil and lives for a really long time. Blackleg just is on that stubble. So crop rotation is your second thing, if not your first. That should minimize a lot of your blackleg issues. Of course, here in Western Canada, we grow a lot of canola and on tighter rotations, right? We typically see in the northern half of the prairies that wheat canola rotation. So that's why we have this buildup of canola residue within the field. We grow resistant varieties already. That's already a mandatory thing that we're doing. But that major gene rotation or changing the genetics is something new, right? So that's one of our newer tools. Lower down on the list of management practices is then a fungicide application. We don't see a lot of producers use a fungicide, mainly because they don't apply it early enough. Blackleg is an airborne pathogen, so it goes up into the canopy and lands on cotyledon canola. So you've got to coat those plants before the pathogen is on them. So we just missed that window. You're pretty well spraying the dirt when that timing is appropriate. Some new things coming down the pipeline for next year are seed treatments. So that'll be something for producers to kind of keep an eye out for. I'm not sure which companies are jumping on board and applying some of those new products, but our current seed treatments don't cover the growing period. They only cover blackleg for if it was actually transferred with the seeds. So it's not protecting the plants at all. So the way that these new treatments would work is they'd kind of protect a plant from cotyledon to about 4 leaf, they figure. It would be very similar to the flea beetle treatments that are systemic, so they're taken up by the plants and then they're protecting those plants for that time. Where you see a product like that work really well is when your genetics are no longer functioning or matching up to that predominant race. If you've got great genetics, we find that fungicide seed treatment is not paying off in the end. So just something to look at in the economics and to really understand your blackleg issue and if it is actually a problem on your farm or not.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Justine, for joining us today. Appreciate the time you've taken and the great information that you've shared with us.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
To all our viewers at home, thank you very much again for joining us as well. If you're interested to learn more about Brett Young, to find your local Brett Young territory representative, or to learn more about Brett Young products, please go to brettyoung.ca. We also have this year on our website a 2020 virtual tour platform that you can learn about all the different topics that we're covering in our video series, as well as trial results from the many products that we market across Western Canada. Again, thank you very much for your time.